So today we're going to talk about wood, but don't worry, that doesn't mean 15 minutes of dick jokes. We're going to be painting an outhouse, so it's going to be 15 minutes of poop jokes. In this video, I'm going to transform this incredibly smooth plastic field toilet into a properly aged and weathered privy, where even the highest ranking officers of the British military would be proud to defecate. I love painting tanks and figures, but sometimes to grow your skills, you need to paint other things, like these wooden shithouses. Now, I also fully realize that you could make something like this with 75 cents worth of popsicle sticks or some styrene sheets, but whatever. When I saw this kit for sale, my brain went wild with the list of diorama possibilities. So I bought it because who doesn't need a porta potty in your stash? This kit has a grand total of 11 pieces. You can build it with a seat, or you can do the Eastern Front version with just a hole in the floor. And since I'm going to put this in a diorama with some English generals, I'm going to use the seated version. All right, right out of the box, one big problem. There's absolutely no texture to this. Despite simulating wooden planks, there's absolutely no wood grain and just some very faint panel lines between the boards here. All the paint in the world is not going to make this thing look like wood if there's no texture, so that's the first step. I started by making the panel lines deeper, the lines between the individual planks of wood. For that, I just used my hobby knife to score them out a little bit more. I also tried using this edged carving tool to make them a little wider, but I found it really didn't do much, so I just stuck with my old trusty hobby knife for this part. Now on some of the edges where the planks run out to the end of the piece, I also cut the plastic all the way through and carved out a little bit bigger gap between the boards to give it a little bit more of a slap together feel and simulate the damage that occurs as lumber like this sits out in the elements. And the next issue is the wood grain texture itself. And for that, I just used a steel wire brush. This one here that I used is pretty skinny, which gave me a little bit more control. And there's a smaller brush tip on the opposite side that was really helpful for like the smaller, harder to reach spots, like where the planks go up on the other side of the studs. There is a little nuance to using the steel brush here. You don't want to be too light touched with it, but you also don't want to grind the hell out of it either. Now the steel bristles will do most of the work. You just have to remember to go lengthwise with the wood, make it match across the different parts so you don't have wood grain going in the wrong direction. And here's a look at how it turned out. I like it. I mean, you want it a little rough like this. I haven't sanded it or anything yet like that yet, and obviously the paint is going to knock down some of the little plastic peels off there, but the wood mostly looks like it's been requisitioned from the local population. Old fences, rubble piles, places like that. With the texture on, there's still a little bit more work to be done. I took the pen vise and drilled out a couple knot holes because this is the kind of wood that's going to have stuff like that. And I also carved out a few damaged spots between the boards with my knife. That helps give it a little rougher look like that. There were some tiny nail holes in the mold here, but they're really hard to see, and there was just one nail holding the boards to the stud. Now, no carpenter worth their salt is going to let that happen. Not even for a field expedient shitter like this one. So I carved out 2 nail holes where each plank connects with the studs. And those are going to be nice later because it's going to help me with the weathering, add depth and detail, things like that. And there we go. A nice, properly detailed wooden outhouse. So now let's paint this thing. So I sacrificed a lot of poop jokes here by not using the brown primer right out of the gate. But I think it's better to go from light to dark when you're painting a larger wooden surface like this. So I started with the primer coat of Sky Gray from Tamiya, and then I laid down a base coat of wooden deck tan. The next step after laying down the base coat and letting it dry was to get this wood darker. To do that, I'd started with a really light gray acrylic ink, but I didn't quite like it. I don't think it was quite dark enough for my taste. So I went with a black ink from Vallejo and just a little bit of water to thin it out on the brush and slap it on the wood here. The purpose of the black ink is to give the wood a heavily weathered look. Remember, this is wood that's been sitting outside in the elements for a long time. It's not going to be pristine yellow brown looking wood like you just picked it up out of the lumberyard or something. As you can see though, it is very black. As Spinal Tap might say, it could be none more blacker. So the next thing to do is to find a way to dial it back a little bit. And I think I have just the answer in our trusty friend, the old steel wire brush. And I didn't get good video of it, but you can kind of see it in action on the corner of the outhouse right here. All I'm doing is very lightly scraping away the deepest, darkest parts of where I've applied the ink to the wood. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. It gives it the gray tones that you get from old weathered wood that's been sitting out in the elements like this stuff. So for the next part of the painting process, I'm just taking kind of a mix of acrylic colors and giving it kind of some further tonal variations to the wood. Here I'm using some orange brown, thinned out with water. Again, you don't want it too thick. You don't want to cover it up or anything like that. So this is just kind of giving it a little variation from plank to plank, spot to spot in the wood. I also used a stone gray on some of the edges where you get a little bit more of the faded gray look on old wood like this. And then I also went and used some other colors like old wood from Vallejo, new wood from Ammo, and even a little German black brown to kind of hit some of those deeper scratches and a few of the other tonal parts in it, around the knot holes, things like that. So remember how I said that this wood was requisitioned from the local population? That means that they're going to be taking wood from lots of different sources, and in some cases that wood is going to have paint on it. So what I did here to simulate that effect was I taped off a few planks around the sides of my little outhouse here, sprayed some chipping fluid on it, and then I came back with Tamiya blue, and flat red paints and just painted it on a few select planks. After the standard 15 minutes or so of drying time, in the interest of transparency, it was probably more like 30 minutes because I used the airbrush for something like 3 minutes, and of course then that means 10, 15, 20 minutes or so of cleaning the damn thing. Poor airbrush hygiene aside, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I like the little extra pop of color. It really looks like wood that's been borrowed from barn doors and houses and rubble piles of northwestern Europe. And more importantly, it's going to be a nice little element that makes it stand out, gives it an eye-catching visual element that's going to help it pop off the diorama base when it's applied on there. This is a trick I like to use even with like stowage. I think you find those little elements that can help it stand out. So like if it's stowage on a tank, it's not just a bunch of crates and ammo boxes. You've got a red oil can or a leather suitcase or a thing of beer bottles or something like that. Finding ways to give your models a little bit of a signature, a little bit of a different look really helps make them stand out as much as a pen wash or oil wash or any of those kind of elements do. Now, because I'm putting this outhouse into a diorama with a bunch of British generals standing around looking at a map, I wanted to add one last detail, and that was to paint officers on one of the planks on top of the privy here. Because after all, we don't want our officers, and this goes for both American and British militaries, but we don't want our officers pooping in the same place as the regular enlisted men now, do we? With the painting process done, it's time for enamels. So for that, I dusted off this old bottle of Tamiya black panel liner, which I haven't really used much in a while, but the black I thought was really good for the gaps between the planks on this project here. This is just your standard pen wash process here. Lay down the enamel wash in the cracks, let it dry to the touch, come back with a brush that's slightly damp with thinner and clean it up. Most of the weathering with this model is accomplished with the paint, that and the wire brush. And I didn't really need a lot of enamels. I didn't use any oils at all. But after the pen wash, I came back with streaking rust effects from Ammo and hit the nail holes with it. I just wanted to give them a little bit of a rusty effect. And it also adds an element of realism because nails in northwestern Europe tend to rust a little bit. And that's it, a coat of flat varnish, and it is good to go. I really enjoy painting wood. It's a lot different than painting a tank, but in a way I think there's a little bit more freedom, a little more creativity involved in the process of how you do it. I mean, you could take this same outhouse, you could make it look brand new, you could make it all blue, all red. In the next video, we're gonna make the diorama for this thing. Should be just a quick, easy, little base kind of diorama featuring an outhouse. What a shitty project.